All right, guys, thanks for coming. I know it's happy hour, and that's a significant thing, so I'm not going to keep you for a full hour, I promise. Or if you just want to grab the beer and come back, I'm cool with that too. But thanks for being here, guys. I know it's been a great day, man. What a great conference. Thanks to John and everybody for doing this. You guys having fun? Yeah? Nice. It's going to be a good night, too. So some of you guys know me. My name is Johnny Long. Some of you know me by my intro. Christian husband, father, hacker, author, pirate, ninja, officially on all those. I'm happy to talk to you about any of them in particular. But despite my claim to all of these tags and things that I sort of identify myself as, my life, like yours, has been a journey. It's been an interesting one. If I was to look at my professional career, I can go back to 2004. And I can look at that as a significant period in my career because I was on top. A little bit about what was going on with me professionally. I had gotten my first speaking slot at DEF CON. I was published in FRAC. I was running one of the first red teams in the industry doing DoD hacking, physical pen tests, wireless assessments, traveling the world, just doing awesome stuff. And like I said, I was on top. I was making good money. Professionally, things were totally lined up. In my personal life, I had 3 kids, a wife that loved me, making good money. There's good money in this business, in case you guys didn't know that, for some of us, anyway. But yeah, I was totally on top. The downside, though, was, some of the stuff that I was doing was kind of unfulfilling. I didn't have a lot of balance in my life, for one. I was all about my career. I had a huge focus on my career. I worked 8 to 12 hours a day. I'd go home and do research. A lot of you know what that's like. It gets to be overwhelming, and if you're like me, that hyper focus on the job, just everything else sort of fades into the peripheral. And I was starting to pay for that because while I had success in my job, I was losing a lot in other areas of my life. And so even though I was successful, it was a little bit unfulfilling. I was a little bit miserable, even though I had a lot of stuff going on. And frankly, I was just a little bit empty. My journey at this point, like I've told you guys that have seen me speak before, my journey at this point sort of changed direction a little bit with a simple prayer because I was frustrated. I grew up in a Christian home and fell back on my Christian roots and was like, man, God, do something with my life. I don't know if that was actually a prayer or a cry for help, desperation or whatever, but it was a turning point where I can look at my life today and say, if I was on top in 2004, I'm whatever is above that, over the top today. I have fulfillment. I found fulfillment in my life, and I found this interesting thing called joy. It's a weird term. It's not said very often in normal conversation, but my life is joyful. Now, there's a lot to be said for those little words. Those are 2 little words that are easy to sort of gloss over, but they're significant. Now, to give you a little bit of background about how my story sort of developed, some of you have heard this before. This is the short version. My journey continued in Uganda. So went to Uganda. My wife went on a missions trip there, came back with pictures of these kids, videos of these kids that were desperately poor, didn't have a lot, double orphans, HIV positive, malaria, abject poverty. With the one picture, this one kid in particular was just this huge grin, laughing, looking up at the camera. He was like 2, 3 years old. He's drooling all over himself because he's just so happy to see my wife. And I looked at that picture and I was like, what is he smiling about? I hate to admit it, but that's like what I thought. And I was like, what is this kid smiling about? Like, he's totally broke. He doesn't have a job. He's 3 years old. Come on. Yeah. He's he's got HIV. He's got malaria. He doesn't have any clothes, but he was joyful. And I looked at that picture and looked at myself and I was like, man, I got everything and I'm kind of not. So that was what drove me to go to Uganda with my wife to kind of see what that was all about. So that journey turned into quite a chunk of my life. What I did was went on a short trip with her, found a way to use my technical skills to help nonprofits that were there who didn't have technical backup to help them with the stuff that they were doing. And in that 2-week trip, I had the organization tell me, "Thank you for saving lives," at the end of this 2-week trip. And I was like, what did I do? I like scraped dirt out of computers and did a little bit of antivirus work, not like the really sexy kind of antivirus work, just the dumb stuff. Felt like useless work, but they told me that I was saving lives because I fixed the computers that were tracking the financial information to get donations from the US to these kids to feed them, give them medical support, put them in school, and support their families. So by fixing those computers, I was saving kids' lives. And that hit me pretty solid. So I went back on another for 3 weeks. We did a little. I keep cutting out. Let me do this. Check 1, 2. There we go. All right. Nope, it's gone again. Hold on. Technical difficulties. I plugged it in. I rebooted it. Yep. Check 1, 2. Check 1, 2. Good? Okay. I'll see if that holds. So we went for a little bit longer. Each time, 2 weeks turned into 3 weeks. 3 weeks turned into a longer trip. Took our kids, went for a year. And that work that we did during our time in Uganda was just kind of going there and seeing what people needed. It was doing some computer training. It was bringing used computers over to Uganda. It was creating a computer training center, putting computers in schools, creating a hacker space of all things, starting a restaurant to give people job skills and to give me some really awesome coffee, which I needed, and starting a leather program, a leather working program. And it was just essentially doing what needed to be done. Now, in the process of all that, what's significant in this version of the story that I'm telling you guys is that the hacker community made all of that happen. The hacker community basically paid for our trips. And one of the things that's interesting about that is that, I went as, a professed Christian. I didn't say I was going on a mission trip or anything like that. I was kind of doing a little bit of soul searching. But our 4 biggest donors during that first year was an atheist, an agnostic, a Wiccan, and a Jew. And I say that a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but it's absolutely the truth. My spiritual beliefs had nothing to do with the fact that the hacker community looked at this thing. They're like, hey, that's cool. I just want to come alongside you and help with that. It was huge. And by extension, the hacker community helped me find fulfillment, joy, and purpose. And when I went and I did that work, what I wanted more than anything was to share that with the community that made that possible, because that was significant. I'm a product of the hacker community. I wanted to share the benefit of this with the hacker community, and that's where Hackers for Charity came from. It was just an opportunity to literally create connections from skill in the hacker community to need, help us, help people. And also in the back of my mind, I wanted to change what the term hacker meant to the general public. Because the media has painted us to be criminals. Every news report that says that word, it's not positive. It's like, oh, look at what the great things the hackers did today. It's always crime. And when I did this work and I saw what the community did, I was like, that needs to change. And so that was one of my primary goals with Hackers for Charity. Now, 15 years ago, what I just described to you was unique. My journey was unique. Now, don't get me wrong, my specific journey is unique. All of ours is. But this idea of sort of getting outside my comfort zone, doing something that was a little bit off center to try to help people, and that being a journey that I'm talking about and trying to do something with, other than just think about, that is not unique anymore. So what I want to talk to you about tonight is I want to give you a few still frames of the video that is the journey of several people in the hacker community that are doing some interesting things that you might not know about. And so some of these folks you may know. In fact, I would venture to guess that you're going to know a lot of these folks. But you may not know some of the things that they're doing that's outside the spotlight. Now, before I go on, one of the things that I want to say is I do not have time to outline all the good that's happening in this community. I've heard a lot of it today in talks. There's a lot of folks that just have good hearts, that get up on stage, that have a positive message. That's huge and that's significant with all the negativity that's going on in the world. I wish I could tell you about every single one of them, but we don't have the time, but that's a good problem to have. But let me start with these fools. How many of you guys know these guys? Show of hands. Okay, yes. I see some double hands. I love that. This is Mubix and Ben 10. They are, yeah, absolutely. They're rock stars. You know, a lot of people know what they do. If they don't, you need to plug in. That's okay if you don't, but you should. These are rock stars. They've done a lot. They've been around for an awful long time. And an interesting thing sort of happened in Mubix's life. He gave a talk about security hygiene that was absolutely terrible. It was really boring. It tanked. And there was some hatred in the audience for, you know, the words that he was saying, and they wanted him to leave. That's kind of hard to believe. How many of you have heard Mubix speak or do his videos or whatever? How many of you think Mubix is pretty cool? How many of you think Mubix is boring? That wasn't me keeping my hand up, sorry. Well, this audience did. The funny thing was, this audience was not the hacker community. This audience was a bunch of kids in his kids' classroom. And he was talking about, you know, hygiene, security hygiene, and how to be safe online. I mean, what's not to be excited about that? Well, yeah, I'm not poking fun at that. That is incredibly important, and he did that with a good heart. But one of the things he said is he's like, man, they didn't like my talk because I was there with a cop, and all they wanted to hear about was what the cops, you know, can I touch your badge? Did you shoot anybody? You know, whatever. You know, they're kids. They just, you know, were interested in this cop. And what he said was that I realized that the reason the talk failed was because of this psychology around authority that the cop had inherently, and he, as a hacker, didn't have in the eyes of the kids, which is a pretty deep statement. I would have just gone, man, kids, man, what kids? Hey, we're talking to them again. You know, no, he looked at it and he was like, okay, I realized the reason behind this. The cop was cool. Kids liked the cop. So what he decided to do was he's like, I'm going to team up with the cop, and I'm going to try I'm going to talk to the officer ahead of time, and we're going to sort of tag team this pitch and see if we can get the kids to sort of hook on to this idea of how to be safe online and all this stuff if the officer is kind of playing along. Now, don't miss the subtext here. Cop and hacker working together to educate kids. You won't see that in the news, right? But that's what he decided to do. His idea was this could be a win-win. And so he started an organization called Hackers in Education. He came to me with this idea, and he's like, what do you think about this thing? Could you help us get this thing off the ground? I was like, that sounds absolutely insane. I love it. Let's do it. So he started this Hackers in Education. And the bottom there says, connecting hackers with schools and police departments to educate students in cybersecurity. It's a great mission. So one of the things that they love to do is they talk about things like cyberbullying, how to identify strangers online, what the dangers are, phishing awareness, account and password security, basic online hygiene, and they're doing it in schools. It's just a great program. So Mubix has brought this message to almost every single school in his kids' district. Working alongside police officers, this idea got some traction, and the school administrators now are sort of going, hey, can we have a hacker in our school too? It's another thing you're never going to see in the headlines, right? But again, Hackers in Education. Along this same line, let me introduce you to Jay Smith, Simple Skink on Twitter. He came to me a little while back and, you know, was sort of tossed around this idea, learned about Hackers in Education. He's a self-taught digital forensics and malware analyst. And this is his website. Recently, he sent me this tweet, and basically what it says is, I worked with Hackers in Education Since then, I've spoken at 8 local schools, begun workshops for teens and Girl Scouts in Louisville. So what I want to point out here is that this was Mubix and Ben 10 sort of having something happen in their life where they're like, hey, there's this thing I could do. Didn't work out really well. They kind of spun it, they reinvented, they shared it with others, and then there was a ripple effect. The thing that Mubix and Ben 10 started now has grown to others, and others are kind of running with this thing. And that's something that's you're going to see as a pattern, hopefully, through this talk. So again, hackers in education. And really, Jay's skill, one of the skills that he listed was he loves breaking down complex information security principles to non-techies and students. So he just took that skill and applied it somewhere, and he's doing good. It's a great thing. Next, I want to introduce Sarah Hansen and Michelle Massaro. Now, the first thing I'll tell you is these are not hackers. The rest of the people in the slides, they're from our community. They're not hackers, but they're awesome people, and they're superhero nerds. They are specifically STEM and technology teachers in Canada. Now, it looks like I've kind of gone off the rails here. I'm all the way in Canada, and I'm not talking about hackers anymore. What happened with these guys was pretty interesting. These guys came on several missions trips to Uganda, and what they wanted to do is they wanted to start teaching kids about robotics, because that's what they did in Canada. And they had this dream of getting their students working with Ugandan students. And so they just came to Uganda with this robot idea. Well, when they were wandering around, they ran into one of the locals and talked about this robot idea. And they're like, oh, you should go talk to Henry. So they go talk to Henry. Well, Henry was the guy running our hackerspace. And he's like, yeah, you want to talk about robots? We've got a hackerspace. And these two, their heads like went boop. They were just like, what? You have a hackerspace in Uganda? So they came into the hackerspace and they went nuts. They just started working with kids left and right, started training them, and they were basically just inspired by what they did. They loved what they did so much they just wanted to share it. Now, this was kind of their mantra. They love learning and believe in the power of education to foster change. They started an organization called Just Cause Uganda, encouraging Ugandan girls to consider their potential in technology fields. These two are essentially our teachers now in the hackerspace. They came in, they trained up a robotics team, they prepped them for the VEX Worlds finals. Those kids that they taught are now teaching other kids, younger kids, because these are high school kids, in younger grades. So it's gone second and third generation just from this crazy idea of why not a hackerspace in Uganda? Didn't make sense at the time. Well, these guys connected with it. They're doing amazing things. Next is Matt SVENSSON. This is his bio: Christian husband, veteran, blue team for life, product integration whisperer. So he's from our community. He's from that other side, that blue side. It's okay, coming from a red team guy. Now, one of the things that Matt loved is he loved what we were doing at Hackers for Charity, and he was like, what would it look like if we did a blue team version of that? And so he basically created this organization called We Defend Charities. Yes, it sounds a little similar to I Hack Charities. That's okay, that's by permission. And basically what he does is he helps charities, there we go again. Helps charities protect their websites and their interests to let them do what they do best without having to worry about the security stuff. So one of the things that they do is they provide consultation, they provide assistance. So they're looking for people that are willing to work with local charities in their areas. They're looking for folks that want to volunteer to help those charities, looking for folks to help with web design, but a great initiative, little thing called We Defend Charities. Amanda Berlin, how many folks know about Amanda? Good, I'm glad to hear that. So Amanda is information security architect and analyst, author, and host of Breaking Down Security podcast, a great podcast. Now, Amanda's story is pretty straightforward. She was stressed and anxious and started talking to people about it. Okay, that doesn't sound like that big of a deal. She's dealing with stress. She's having different issues. She starts talking about it. She starts tweeting about anxiety and depression and these mental health issues. She talked about this interesting phenomenon where she'd go to conferences and she'd get high anxiety and get like these panic attacks at conferences. And I was like, wait, what? I read that and I was like, that happens to me all the time. And she echoed my thoughts when she said, you know, I work remotely. I'm by myself all the time. I go to a conference and boom, it's 24/7. I'm on all the time. There's all these people talking to me. You know, I want to appear happy. And she's like, I got into this place where I was just stressed all the time about conferences. And she's like, I just thought I was, you know, really strange. But the more she started talking to people, she realized that even social people who have it all together kind of struggle with this thing too. You know, this kind of, you know, performance anxiety thing, this social anxiety thing performance anxiety is a different thing. I know, sorry. Social anxiety, she didn't talk about that. But she loved speaking, and with that little bit of exposure, she realized, you know, I could do more with this thing. So started an organization called Mental Health Hackers. Mental health is important for everyone. Let's talk about it more. Pretty straight up the middle. She started at DerbyCon 2018. How many folks got a chance to see that village? Really cool what she did. She basically started doing a village idea, a workshop that turned into a village where people could learn about all kinds of different things. There was therapeutic talks, they had massage chairs, they had professional therapists. The whole idea was to come in, relax, unwind a little bit, try out different products like these heavy blankets she read about. She's like, this helps, you know, it helps calm you down, but they cost like $100. Who's gonna buy it and just, you know, figure out. So she'd bring these things and let people try them out. These ginormous inflatable chairs that people could relax in. She set up a thing where people could like take naps if they wanted to. And it was just like this fabulous thing. So it just became this oasis of information and support at conferences that started from her place of just being in a situation in her life, talking to others about it, and it grew from there. So hackers helping hackers, I love that concept. Workshops, resources, all kinds of stuff. Next is Chris Sanders. Chris's bio is pretty interesting. Just a small town boy. Let's get our lighters out. You know, lonely, nope, karaoke, all right. I mean, literally, this guy is a small town boy. So he grew up in Graves County, Kentucky. And I was like, is that a town? Like, that's a county. Like, what's the town? He's like, no, it's just the county. He's like, it's kind of rural. We're known for agriculture and tire manufacturing. I was like, huh? I went on Google Maps and looked at this, and sure enough, his story checked out. Like, it's farms, and there was a tractor supply place. It's pretty nice. Now, I'm not putting down rural areas, and neither was Chris, but his story was basically that he loved technology in this environment and did not have the resources available to pursue that interest. So one of the things that he did was teachers came alongside him and saw his potential. They basically said, man, there's something different about this kid. What he likes is interesting. We're going to come alongside of it. He became the first college graduate in his family. He's now a tech education company founder, a security expert, and author. And one of the things that Chris did is he kind of took this idea of kids in rural areas not having access to technology, created this thing called the Rural Tech Fund. The tagline there is, talent is distributed equally, but opportunity often isn't. And what he does is he basically does micro donations of equipment and gives them to schools to kickstart them in STEM education and technology. It's as simple as that. So far, He's reached 96,000 students in total through these micro donations, giving kids access to technology to get them started. He shared some interesting stories. One of them is from Anvik, Alaska, which is on the Iditarod. How many people have been? I'm not expecting anybody to have any idea where that is. It's got a population of 80, as in 8 with a 0 behind it, 80 people. There were a dozen students in this town. One of the teachers reached out to his group and said, hey, we love what you're doing, but we're kind of far away. Can you help us out? And he was like, heck yeah. Hooked him up with some Raspberry Pis, got him started with some technology stuff, and basically started a STEM education program in a town with population of 80. Another example he gave me was in Hunterdon County Library. He loves giving me the county. He never gives me the town. He's a rural guy. It's in New Jersey, and basically they contacted the RTF. He gave them some microbits to help them sort of help students learn about these things. The library started running STEM classes. Then the library started making these kits available for kids to check out. They didn't have enough kits, so they wrote to microbits, got more kits, and now the library's students, the students that have graduated the classes, go to other schools to teach them about technology, and they got that from the library, and the library got that from the RTF. Lots of really cool stuff going on there. Chris Cox, security evangelist, fixes most things he breaks. That's something I can't say about me. He's a DoD cybersecurity instructor and founder of the Operations Security Professionals Association. Now, in Chris's journey, his wife was the victim of abuse. And so he really had a heart for victims that are in domestic abuse situations. It was as simple as that. This really fueled a desire in him to fight against what he calls tech-enabled abuse. And so he created an organization called Operation Safe Escape. Security professionals helping vulnerable populations escape abuse and harassment. Really great organization. He works with victims, so he helps them plan their escape from an abusive situation, helps cover their tracks when they leave, uses all sorts of tech in and around this, makes sure that they have support resources, that they have access to a safe house. He does OPSEC education for the victims, for the safe houses and the shelters. And he works with law enforcement to help educate them about the tech side of abuse, how abusers can track their victims online and how to prevent it. He does all this crazy anti-OSINT stuff to throw abusers off the trail, basically, anti-OSINT stuff. He's got a lot of opportunities to basically connect with victims, give your OSINT resources, or just be there on the other end of a Slack or a Skype conversation for a victim in a time of need. Lots of volunteer opportunities. Couple stories he gave me. One woman was being abused for 5 years, reached out to his organization. He was able to his organization was not only able to get her to safety, but she's been free for the first time in 5 years, and for the first time has slept through the night. I don't know if you can imagine that, not sleeping through the night for 5 years. I mean, that's a huge thing. Their organization recently helped train every New York NYPD officer in domestic violence, technology around domestic violence, and how to understand the technical side of it. And they've partnered with the 211 program in multiple states to get involved in high-risk situations. So they're the go-tos when somebody dials 211. Amazing organization. Bill Pollack. How many people know Bill? Yes, No Starch Press. How many people know No Starch Press? Great books. Totally awesome, nerdy books. I'm glad you guys know Bill. He is the founder of No Starch Press. He's been a fixture in our community since 1999. Bill's been around for quite a long time. His story is interesting. I don't know if you can believe this about Bill, but he was harassed as a young nerd on the spectrum. And really, he just wanted to learn. Those of you that have talked to Bill know how passionate he is about learning. You know, he has a passion for it. But he was harassed as a kid because of that. And one of the things that he told me was, he's like, I had no interest in sports, so that made me an outcast where I was. Not that there's anything wrong with sports, but it isolated him among his peers. He also realized that parents and friends who don't understand science and technology are horrible support people for kids that do. So if you got a kid that's interested in STEM stuff with parents who aren't and want them to go a different direction, it basically blocks them right out of the gate. It's a tough situation. So Bill started the No Starch Press Foundation, a foundation for hackers built by hackers, and he's doing a ton of stuff. He's supporting STEM initiatives. He's giving his resources available to kids that need them. He does contests, scholarships, educational programs for young potential hackers. To date, he's taken $800,000 from No Starch and put it into this foundation to help stimulate growth in STEM activities around the world. One of the things he does is he supports STEM education in poor neighborhoods, which is amazing. Helps self-taught hackers land their first real tech job, develop a career, and establish themselves in the hacking community. I mean, if you ever run into somebody that's like just new and they're getting their start, and you're like, what can I do to get involved and plug in? That's music to your ears, right? It's perfect, the perfect kind of thing to help. He supports social, educational, and emotionally oriented meetups designed to address depression and suicide in the hacker community, often brought on by isolation and misunderstanding of the aims and interests of the hacker. I mean, that's deep stuff. I mean, I have a huge appreciation for his books and his publishing company and the way he treats his authors and the topics, but I didn't know that about Bill. I didn't know that he was doing that. And one of the quotes that he has here is he says, "We can all reach out to help people like us to be challenged and fulfilled and to become part of a community that supports and understands us." Wow, that's huge. Bill's first grant, what he does is he's distributing grants to organizations that are working in these areas. His first $100,000 grant is getting ready to launch from the No Starch Press Foundation. It's Bill Pollock. How about this guy? Show of hands. Maybe people know Chris. Yes. Chris, as you know, security expert, author, socialengineer.org founder, and world-class instructor, and just all-around nice guy. His story is he worked a bunch of cases where he saw child trafficking, and he was brought in to use his expertise to try to stop that, to basically track and capture child predators. He was so hit by this and the work that he did that he decided he needed to be more involved. He says he was hit hard and impacted by the impact crimes had on innocent people. He wanted to do something about it. So he took an interesting angle on this one. His organization's called the Innocent Lives Foundation. It says there, "We hunt, unmask, identify child predators, and hand them to law enforcement." I love that. His approach was interesting because in the beginning what he did was he teamed up with literal rock stars and actresses and advocates, brought this team together to basically raise the exposure of the issue. And today the ILF is full-time doing this work. Basically they do the heavy lifting for a lot of cases for the federal government where they do the work using social engineering and OSINT skills of their volunteers to literally hand child predators to law enforcement. Law enforcement picks it up from there, runs due process on that to make sure it sticks. Literally hunting, tracking these guys down, putting them behind bars. Absolutely cool stuff. So, interesting stuff going on. And this is only the tip of the iceberg. I can't tell you how exciting it is for me to see this. Because like I said, when I got started with my journey, we didn't have this kind of activity. I'm not taking credit for that. Don't get me wrong. All I'm suggesting is that I like to think that there was a bit of a ripple effect in the hacker community by good things happening that affected others and giving others inspiration to do things. So in my journey, 2017 came along. I came back from Uganda. I was there 7 years total with my family. And the most technical thing that I was doing was trying to speed up my internet and teaching people office packages so they could get jobs. So I basically committed suicide on my career by doing, I mean, can you imagine 7 years out of the industry? Some days I feel like if I take a 15-minute break, I'm going to lose it all and not be relevant and not, be able to continue my job. But I was able to get back. I'm working for a little company you might have heard of called Offensive Security, which is amazing. Since 2004, I've worked on over a dozen book projects, got world recognition. Our nonprofit, Hackers for Charity, is still running. The programs that we ran over there are still in operation. They're still running. The restaurant we turned over to the local employees. They have now full ownership of it. The leather program was turned over to them. The CTC, our training center, operates free training all the time. So we fund their salaries and their rent so they can do that. The CTC is in its third generation. I taught Ugandans who became teachers. Those teachers taught students who became teachers, and those students are now teachers. Third and fourth generation in our computer training center. Hackerspace is the same thing. Like I said, third generation in the hackerspace. Now, I'm not making as much as I was in 2004. It was a little bit of a trade-off there. But one thing that I did get was purpose and fulfillment out of the work that I did. Now, that was a good start. 2017 was a good start, but it gets better. I spent the past 2 years, from 2017 to now, dealing with literally a lifetime of hurts, habits, and hang-ups in my life through a formal recovery process. I found peace and joy and have a real relationship with my family. I'm closer to my kids than I've ever been. This is all another talk. But the point is, it all started with stepping out of my comfort zone. That one decision to go from Caesar's Palace in a suite speaking at Black Hat to get on a plane to go to Uganda, which barely had internet, was stepping out of my comfort zone. It stretched me and it grew me. And I'm thankful and blessed to have a fresh perspective on my place in the world. This is unique. But it all started with that slight change of focus. I had an opportunity to serve others, and I didn't just think about it and go, well, I could do that. I actually did it. So the point of this is, wherever you are on your journey, I just encourage you to take that next step towards service. If there's something that's kind of been nagging at you and it's like, hey, there's this thing that could help somebody that you could do, and you've been ignoring it, I'd encourage you to not ignore it anymore. Because like everybody else that I've highlighted, this is you. It's not your picture. You're better looking than that, but this is you. You have skills, abilities, and gifts. Now, you may think your skills don't apply. You may think that your weird, oddball skills, not just technical, but whatever your life skills are, they just don't apply. I'm here to tell you they absolutely do. Your skills can make a difference for somebody that needs them. Every person in this presentation was just doing their life, walking their journey. They used their skills to help another person in that first step. It was a choice. Well, you're on a journey. You've been through some junk. You've seen some stuff. Your journey matters. The stuff that you've been through is relevant. Makes a huge difference. Can make a huge difference. So, I want you to get involved. Now, what does that look like? Well, these organizations are just the beginning. There's lots of organizations inside and outside our hacker community. I love to get engaged with organizations that started within our community. You don't have to, but it's a good start. What we want to do is we want to give you the opportunity to connect. If you have a skill, we want to give you the ability to plug in your skills to a need. And it's as simple as hopping on our website, getting on our Slack channel, and we'll inform you about opportunities. Something comes up, we'll say, hey, we need somebody to help out with this. You jump in. Or you have an idea and you're like, man, this is kind of weird, but I think I'd like to help somebody do this. We'll point you in the right direction to an organization that's doing that you can plug right into. Or third option, your idea is so weird and so unique that nobody's doing it, we want to make that happen. We're not going to tell you to go start a nonprofit. We'll act as a shelter for you, a 501c3 shelter, so that you can get the project off the ground, get funding to it, and see if there's legs to it. And if there are, and you decide you want to start your own organization, that's great. We want to help you with that too. So it's all about getting on our website, plugging in. These are the organizations that I've covered. I'm also going to put them on our website. They'll be in our Slack channel as well. I'll put these slides online. So that's it, guys. I just want to thank you. I want to thank you for your journey. You guys are amazing. And I want to thank you for the time that you've given me to talk to you tonight. Any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Thanks, guys.
Hey, I want to say thank you very much for coming out. We threw this talk in, I think, like 2 weeks ago, right? He's like, I want to talk. He's going to talk. I also want to say that, years ago, do you remember whenever we met at Sector for the first time? And I told you about cutting my hand and bleeding all over the case and all that. I remember sitting down at dinner with Johnny. I think Renderman was there. I can't remember who else was there. I think Bill, no. Who else was there? It was Render and... I can't remember who else. But I remember Johnny talking to someone at the table who I don't even remember at all. And he was talking about how in this industry, if you give and you give and you give, the industry gives back. And I think that that's probably kind of sums up what you just said. We take care of each other. And I know there's some people in the industry that are a pain in the ass, but the vast majority of people are awesome. And I really attribute that to you and what you've done over the years. So thanks again.
Yeah. I'm also available if you guys want to come up or if you want to raise your hand for